getting ready to start this box. I got this Weller by Cohiba, and getting ready to start cutting the wood and getting it laid out. But I just kind of wanted to go over how I get started with these things. If you watch anybody build, everybody builds them a little differently. They start things a little differently, and the thing is there's no rules when it comes to building cigar box guitars, and that is 100% true. However, I think there's definite steps you got to follow, because one thing affects the other, affects the other, affects the other. Eventually you're going to get down the road and realize that you may have worked yourself into a corner. So I always try to think about what the next step is going to be and how what I'm doing is going to affect that. And so the first thing I do is my box layout. I'll turn the camera around here in a minute and show you that. But typically also, if you've watched most of my builds, I kind of like let the box dictate the build, as in I try to preserve pieces of the box and the logo or whatever it may be. But this box is really long, so it is let's see here, and take measure on it anyway. It's like 14.5 inches long, so that could create some issues, or maybe it doesn't. But the biggest thing is to figure out where you want stuff laid out, what your scale length's going to be, all that, before you ever start cutting the wood or cutting into the box. So here, I'll turn this around and I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, here you go. This is I'm doing this kind of backwards for me, but I turned it around so you could, so it looks like it's facing the right way in the camera for you. So, given the length of this box, well, let me back up. So like I told you, I like to try to keep the logo and certain things on the box, because it's a cigar box guitar, so preserve the logo. That's kind of my thoughts. On this particular guitar, though, if I end up trying to put the bridge back here, if you're looking at this template here, you can see that by the time I move this thing all the way back where I'm on a 25-inch scale, I would barely get 12 frets out of this thing. So it's things, little things like that you got to take into consideration. So when I lay this on here, get my 25-inch mark, it's right here. It's going to put my bridge about right here. So I'm going to start to cover up this Weller. And so that was the thing. Okay, well, maybe I can keep the Cohiba. So if I put a pickup here, put another pickup up here where you can still see the Cohiba, and I let the neck, the fretboard come slightly over the box, I could still get 17 or 18 frets out of this thing. And so that's kind of my goal. So it leaves a little space back here in the back. I got 2 pickups, so I'm probably going to do some kind of, I'm not going to put these red knobs on here, but this is just to help me kind of lay out the box. Probably going to do some kind of three knob layout. So maybe like a volume, a blend, and a tone, or something like that. And then go from there. But once I do this, then kind of figure out my layout. Now I can actually start to figure out how long the neck needs to be, and I can cut all that stuff, start cutting all that stuff, and then I will actually start configuring the box, cutting everything out for the box. I usually get the neck part of the way finished before I cut the box and start doing anything with that. The first thing I want to do is get the neck done. But before that, I have to, at least for me, I have to figure out what my layout's going to look like. So if I move this back a little bit, you can see the idea is to kind of keep the Cohiba in there. These would be the pickup covers. Obviously, there's no pickups underneath them, and I usually use a hardtail bridge. So hardtail bridge in roughly that location, and then the fretboard would come right up to the wood there. and that's going to be my layout. So there you go. That's, to me, that's number one. Then after that, you can start laying out the wood, get it cut, get it glued up, double check it, make sure that's what you want, and then start fitting it to the box. All right, just pulled the clamps off. I still got a long way to go on this thing, but there it is. I always do well, I say always. I normally do a scarf joint, so this is the beginnings of it. You can see it's got a maple, it's going to be a maple neck. It's got a walnut heel, and you saw in the video earlier, put a walnut fretboard on there. So there you go. The other thing I like to do for most of my builds as well is I take a lot of the end pieces when I cut the wood, so I will end up putting this on here to add some width to the headstock here. So but again, you kind of got to go in steps. I can't put these on here yet because I like to take a router and at least knock this edge off, which saves me a little work in the long run. And if I put those wings on there, then I can't lay this down flat on my router table, and I can't get all the way up here to the corner where I need to be. So I'll need to do that first. Then I'm going to glue these wings on there. In the meantime, I'm going to start cutting fret slots in this here fretboard, and then we'll get everything married together. And so it's usually about this time, either now or after I round over the edges, that I will actually start cutting the slot to fit this into the box, and figuring out all that as well. So just not really a how-to, just kind of going into the things, things I think about prior to moving on to the next step. I have steps that I go to. The other thing is you can see this headstock is the same thickness as this. It's the same piece of wood, but that's obviously going to be too thick to put tuners in. And so what I will have to do is take some material off of here, and I do that. I also do that prior. I do it after I glue these on, and I do that prior to gluing the fretboard. So I just took this out of the clamps from gluing up the fretboard. It's underneath here. Now it's sitting in a vise. And I'm hitting it with this shin-to just to get it a little more shape into it. So prior to gluing it up, I had hit it with a round-over bit, router round-over bit, and I went from here all the way up to about here. Then I glued up the fretboard, and so now I just need to knock off those. I have been knocking off those sharp edges and getting it to a little more comfortable shape, a little more contour. Then I'll take it out of the vise here and start hitting it with the sandpaper and getting it to its finished state. But you can see this shin-to is pretty aggressive, and it does take off a lot of material. But that's kind of what you want. I just need to get this rounded or semi-rounded, so it's got a nice contour and it feels good in the hands. All right, and then after that, it'll be ready for some frets. So we're getting close. And just like that, bam, we're down to 220 grit. So that's not the final grit sandpaper I'll use, but I usually stop about this point at 220. because on this particular one I'm going to put some fret dot markers. I'm going to solder burn them in on the front and on the side, and so I will burn those in, and then I will hit it with 220 again, and then I will step it the rest of the way down. And usually I step it down to 800 or 1000 grit, somewhere's up in there. And for necks like this, where it's especially like this one, which is maple and walnut, I just use some tung oil to preserve it. I like the way the wood looks. I use the 2 different types just for that contrast. I put that little stripe in there, so I don't want to stain it or anything like that. I just want to preserve the look of the wood, you know, brighten it up a little bit. So tung oil does that quite nicely, and that's what I'll use. So coming along, this is it. This is what the neck looks like before it goes in a box. And you can see, so this area here, let me point here, slides over the lid, and so this piece rests on the underside of the lid. This rests on the top of the lid, and then there's a trough here, and that's just to keep the lid from, or allow the lid a little room to vibrate. And then here on this particular build, the bridge is going to mount right up in this area. I got all this room back here, but this will secure down to, or touch the top, and then I'll screw it in from underneath the bottom of the box to hold it in the box. But there you go. She's at 220. She's getting close. So after that, like I said, I'll put these burns in there, and then it's on to the frets. It does take some time to get the frets dialed in, but then once that's done, it's just a matter of putting however many coats I deem necessary of tung oil on this and letting it sit overnight and dry while I then turn my attention fully to the box. So at this point I've cut the lid, and so it's fitted to the box. I've also reinforced the box, and then on the inside of the box here, this back here, this is the way I center the neck into the box. They do it many different ways, but this is what works for me. This way, every time I slide this thing in here, it slides. The back slides right up in between these 2 blocks, and I know where it's at. And then I make all my marks on the front. So now I know where, if the fretboard were to extend all the way across, this is where it would go. So that tells me where the neck is inside the box. And so now I can center up my pickups, my pickup covers, center up my bridge, make sure it's, you know, that's important. You don't want to put the bridge way down here and the neck's way up here. That wouldn't be good, man. Anyway, yeah. So this kind of helps me with the layout. I usually always put some tape on here, and I don't like messing these up. Like I said before in the beginning of this video, I kind of like to just use the box, the looks of the box, and incorporate that into the build. I'm trying to preserve this Cohiba, but I think I'm gonna end up into the sea some. We'll see. It's looking like it's pretty close. But anyway, there you go. All right, I'm gonna finish getting this thing, getting the solder burns put in there and getting this thing fretted up, and then it'll be ready to put it together. I still got to sort out what I need to do with the box, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut this video here, and you'll have to tune in to the next one to see the finished product. But I definitely appreciate you watching this video, checking it out. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'll catch you in the next one. See you.